And almost live.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers. I forgot to get a drink. It's like Coors Light. You must be in the middle of the country.
No, this a very generous friend dropped off a bunch of beers the other day, and this was in the mix. So
Yeah.
kind of came for free. So I can't turn down a free beer, even if it's a cool light. And I actually like it. I'm a simpleton when it comes to beer. So
Yeah, I'm the opposite. I'm not a real beer drinker. I'm not a real coffee drinker. Coffee's got to have lots of cream and sugar, and the
ah,
beer's got to have a really hoppy IPA kind of feel for me usually.
see, for me, I want my coffee like motor oil with nothing in it, no sugar, no milk, just black coffee. But beer, I drink the normal stuff.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny.
So how you doing, man? Thanks for jumping on this call. Where are you right now?
I'm in Florida, St. Petersburg, Florida. I kind of grew up here. I'm actually French Canadian. I grew up I was born in Montreal, and my mom kind of eloped with a American baseball player when I was young, and then once she finally became legal, she was able to bring me down here, and so I grew up and have been in the States for a long time.
Cool. Is St. Petersburg, is that where St. Pete's Beach is, or is it separate areas?
Yeah, well, St. Pete Beach became its own city, but it's right next to St. Petersburg. So St.
Right.
Petersburg's the city, and then St. Pete Beach is how Florida has all the islands that form the beaches. You get the Keys basically are an extension of that, but most of the beaches in Florida are a barrier island of sorts, and St. Pete Beach is a barrier island.
Right. Yeah, I was down there a few times when I was a kid, and I remember, is the Pink Palace still a thing? Is that
Oh
still
yeah,
there?
it's called the Don Cesar.
Right, right. The
Yeah,
Don
yeah,
Cesar, yeah.
yeah.
They
That's
had great a little ice cream shop in there, I remember. We we
uh,
went we went there one day and they had just closed like 5 minutes prior. And we went, myself, my two sisters, and my dad, and we were like, please, sir, can we have some ice cream? And the dude was just having a bad day or something. He was like, no, we're closed. Let's get the hell out of here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I've actually been
Also,
there recently. That's actually a great little ice cream spot.
interesting fact. What was the name of the movie? Not Tropic Thunder. Thunder in Paradise with Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't. You know that movie? It's a pretty random reference,
Yeah. I mean,
but
it's like an 80s movie. It's been a while, but it was shot in Clearwater, just north of here. Yeah.
yeah. And we like back in the day when Hogan had his like WWE crew and his manager had like a piano keyboard necktie and stuff. Anyways, they were filming that movie on St. Pete's Beach one day, and I was a huge WWE fan or
Yeah.
WWF at the time when I was a kid,
Yeah.
and we chased like a group of us, myself, my dad, and a bunch of other fans chased Hulk and his manager into the Don Cesar, and that's how they got away from us because they ran into the hotel.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I've never met him, but he's become sort of a local. He's mostly in Clearwater, which is like the next city, next beach up.
Hogan
And
has?
yeah, he's
Oh,
been a Florida guy for some time. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen him, but you'd see him in his like Testarossa or some Ferrari. I think he had like a red Dodge Viper at some point, and just like
right.
the only time I've ever seen him was just randomly at a traffic light. You pull up next to him or something.
That's kind of cool. Do you put down your window and be like, "Hey,
Hey,
Hulk, what's up,
brother.
man?"
Hey,
Yeah,
brother.
hey, brother.
So
Um,
this was a kind of a cool place to grow up in. Hooters started in Clearwater, and
oh,
like that. There was a big '80s thing in
the Hooters was
Clearwater.
like a critical childhood memory for you. You can tell. It's like, it was a great place to grow up. Hooters was founded here.
Well, it's just it was really part. It was one of the things that put Clearwater on the map in
Right,
terms
right,
of that area. In Clearwater, when you live, I grew up in Tampa, which is just on the other side of the bay. And when you lived in Tampa and you went to the beach, you typically went to Clearwater Beach.
right.
And the nation's first Hooters was right there, like on the way to the beach, and it was I don't know what the iconic parallel would be for but every city has like kind of like its dominant beer or its dominant chain, and those things were much bigger back in the '80s. So it was just one of those things. Now Scientology is what Clearwater is known for.
Really?
That church has bought up most of downtown, so it's quite different than it used to be.
What are they? Is it like they bought it for investments, or they have like headquarters and
Yeah, I mean,
offices and stuff.
yeah, they set up a headquarters there, which used to be like the Fort Harrison Hotel or something like that, one of the oldest hotels in Florida. And they bought that, and then they bought the thing next to it, and then the thing next to it, and the thing next to it, and it just like, and they're getting people on the city council of the city, and it just it's a very powerful force in Clearwater.
Haven't heard much about Scientology recently. I mean, obviously, there's lots of other, perhaps more pressing issues to discuss,
Yeah,
but
yeah, certainly.
it's
It's
still
pretty
a
wild.
dominant, it's still a
Yeah.
dominant thing.
Well, I mean, it's just Clearwater is just one of their bases. I know they've got a big thing in California as well. But yeah, it's just one of those things that Clearwater's got these sort of iconic things that people
Hooters
so
and Scientology.
yeah, that's a
Could be
great,
worse, I guess.
great combo.
Nice combo. How you been making out amidst all the madness that's going on? Everything
Oh
okay
man.
your way?
Well, so I'm in the music business, and
Right.
what I do is I promote living room concerts around the world. So basically, picture a professional artist, not a famous one generally. These are more like independent singer-songwriters, but professionals who tour and play concerts in people's homes. And when they play at your house, it's for you and your friends. Everybody comes over, chips in $20, and the artist is a guest in your home, typically overnight. You'll put them up in a guest room and feed them and send them off the next day after breakfast. And it's this really awesome tradition that's been helping musicians for decades. And now I created one of the first websites to promote that. It's called Listening Room Network. And essentially, we're kind of like an Airbnb for house concerts. So
Cool.
if you love music, and especially, acoustic singer-songwriter type stuff, and you have a house with a little bit of space, you can be a host. And then the artists join the site to have access to those hosts, and they find each other just like an Airbnb type of thing. So they each have a profile and they find each other. So the short answer to your question is our business has been crushed, because everything's based on these intimate gatherings. And a lot of our audience are baby boomers and even seniors. And they're like the most at risk for this COVID thing. So
Hmm.
it's been my business just came to a halt, an absolute halt.
Yeah.
And then what we had to do is kind of pivot and try to help support all the live streaming shows and stuff that artists were doing instead. And now we're just really trying to plan the way forward, and basically promoting outdoor shows, saying, hey, listen, what we do know is that the safest thing is, if we're going to gather, we want to have plenty of space for people to spread out. We're safer outside, and shorter durations and all these things. And so if for people who want to have concerts, we're calling it music by the yard. We're selling music by the yard. And basically, in your front yard, backyard, patio, instead of 25 to 40 people, you're having 15.
Right.
And instead of a 2-hour show, it's 45 minutes. So not everybody has to use the restroom. And it's just, especially here in Florida. But I mean, what we do is worldwide. But a lot of places it's friggin' hot in the summertime, and you don't want to be doing a 3-hour show outside.
Right.
So
How
yeah.
long have you been doing this? The platform, I mean.
So I started the website in 2006, and before that, I was a touring performer for a really long time as well. So I played clubs and coffee houses and colleges and did all that stuff.
What kind of music?
So singer-songwriter, think like modern day James Taylor,
Right.
somewhere between that and Jason Mraz, Dave
Hmm.
Matthews, that kind of vibe.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so the platform would take a cut from matching up, performers with hosts. I imagine that's how it works, right?
Yeah. So what the decision I made early on with the site is that I didn't want to be chasing pennies. I didn't want to get into the commission business. And so we created as a membership website. So everybody pays to be a part of the network and to use all the resources that we provide.
Right.
So artists pay up $100 a year. The people who host shows only have to pay like $20 a year to be part of the network. And we give them, an RSVP system and all kinds of tools and ways to find great artists who are touring in their direction, not just the local ones, but the ones who are looking for gigs while they're traveling and on the road. So that's been, one of the toughest things about being on the road are the expenses of lodging. And when you're playing house concerts, that's typically covered. They're happy to host you overnight, put you up in the
Right.
guest room. You know, a lot of hosts, their favorite part is after the show is over, they send all their friends home and they get to hang out with you and have a glass of wine and hear some more stories.
Yeah.
So it's
It's
a
a really
great,
unique experience, I would imagine.
yeah, it's this amazing tradition, and I've been really spoiled, you know, because I kind of put myself at the center of this thing. So the people, like artists and the people who host shows who really like this vibe tend to be really nice people. So I've been like at the center of this really sweet network for 15 years, and it's been awesome.
Awesome, man. And like, has it been a good business for you? Like
Yeah,
when
I mean,
prior to COVID, obviously.
yeah, it's you know, it's kind of a lifestyle business. You know, the way I run it, I didn't go for scale. I didn't want to be the McDonald's of house concerts. So like there's a really difficult audition process for artists. They have to have great video
Right.
to show what they do and to make it easier for the host to promote the shows. So, you know, we're not really in the business of helping newbies. We're looking for artists that have, you know, even though they're not famous, they're, they've been at it. They've got several albums released. They've got a great honed show. They've got good videos. And so, you know, instead of, you know, trying to go for scale, we said, no, let's be more boutique. Let's really cater to, um, you know, people that really love this idea
Hmm.
and really talented artists. So we have, you know, a couple hundred artists. We don't have thousands of artists. We have a couple hundred, and then we have close to 1,000 hosts around the world. So we're one of the few places on the internet where there's actually more opportunities than artists. One of the things that you run into as a musician is like, you know, if you go to a conference, there's like, it's you and 10,000 other artists trying to talk to 100 people.
Right.
And so we've kind of flipped that on its head. So it's been pretty awesome for artists. Um, and then, you know, my thing now is just a little pivot that I'm trying to do because I'm, you know, obviously in the crypto space, and is I really want to inspire artists to get involved with getting their first little bit of Bitcoin.
Hmm.
Because you know, I think, you know, certainly there's a lot of people out there hurting. There's a lot of people that still need to learn about Bitcoin, but I think artists are so often at the margin. They're you know, because they tour, it makes no sense to own a house, and you know, they're always the last to put money away and to secure sort of a retirement for themselves. You know, they're self-employed. There's nobody taking money out of their out of their, you know, out of their paycheck, and so they've got to be like fully responsible for their livelihood and their retirement.
Hmm.
And and as you know, I mean, there's just, you know, the fiat system is a pretty fickle friend for artists who are, getting paid cash most of the time. So yeah, so I'm really like trying to create a way to not be in their face about it, but like making them aware that they've got somebody they can come to for help
Yeah.
or just getting started. Because I remember what it felt like when I first got started, and you know, so you know, you get a tip from somebody that you trust, and you go, okay, let me check this out, and you go on. You know, at the time it was Coinbase. I got in like in the fall of 2017, so right before the big run,
Hmm.
the last big run, and so I didn't get the massive gains. I got in like in September, October, so I only got to see the
Three,
two.
4 or 5 grand a coin, something like that. Yeah.
I got in around $5,000 Bitcoin. And what I know is going to happen again, because it's human nature. You go there and you get sticker shock, right? It's like $5,000. If you're used to thinking in terms of stocks, you know, it's like, okay, $50 a share, $100, $200 a share. And when you're looking at Coinbase or some other exchange that, you know, you start seeing, okay, well, there's BSV that's 200. There's, you know, wow, there's this Litecoin that's only $50. And, you know, maybe I would do better with those things. And, you know, somebody needs to advise people, you know, who aren't on crypto Twitter, um, that, you know, whoa, don't make this mistake. Don't, you know,
Sats the standard, man. That's why we need Sats the standard. I think that's the
yeah.
direction we should go.
Yeah, but I think, when you're a newbie, if you don't have somebody holding your hand, or if you don't have some solid advice, you'll get a little bit of Bitcoin and you go, well, I probably should get some of that ETH too. And I should probably get some, because who knows? I don't know anything about this. So, let me get a little bit of everything and maybe I'll do all right.
A 100%. It's so hard to avoid. Like I've directed a number of friends to a really great exchange here. It's called Shake Pay. I love them. Super easy. It's like
Yeah.
everything's great, but they do also sell Ethereum. So they sell
Yeah.
Bitcoin and Ethereum. And so often it's like people go there and then a day later they're like, yeah, I scooped up some, but I'm really interested in this Ethereum thing. And I just ask them like, why? That's an interesting feedback. Why are you interested in it? And they're
Yeah.
like, I don't know. It seems cool. It's cheaper and everything. So it is definitely something to overcome.
Yeah. Are
But
you, are you a complete maxi, like Bitcoin and nothing else? Or do you have have some side bets out there?
I don't have any side bets. I think allow a free market to bloom, and I think the competition for money is a pretty closed case. Like, is it possible that other networks could have some kind of internal economy that settles in something that is broadly mm, of interest or valued by the space, a la tokens in a game of some kind? Like, sure, that
Yeah.
exists in some capacity, but I'm here for the massive disruptive change that is a once in a several millennia upgrade in the money, and I think
Yeah.
that's what Bitcoin represents.
Yeah. I mean, philosophically, I'm 100% Bitcoin. I do get really frustrated, when I'm looking at charts and I'm seeing, Ethereum's, up a little more. Every time Bitcoin goes up, Ethereum goes up a little bit more. And you're like, this is such an annoying thing to see. But I do have like,
Short term.
well, but the thing is, yeah. So, but in terms of, if you're trying to maximize your returns on stuff, I think I mean, I'm not there yet, but right now I'm still all Bitcoin. When I first got in 2017, I did the thing. I mean, I got a little XRP, I got a little bit of Ethereum, and and just sort of divorced myself from those positions a good while ago. But knowing what human nature, knowing that most of the people who are going to come to this when Bitcoin hits 20 or 50 or whatever, they're not going to be rational, and they're going to be grabbing a little bit of everything. And these things that have very low liquidity are going to shoot up. So, I just, it's so tempting to get a little bit of the other stuff.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. And to each their own. I just, greed really needs to be channeled in the proper way. And I think, I'm greedy for sats, and I think
Yeah.
that's a good channeling of my greed because
Yeah.
it makes me accumulate even when I don't want to. But I try to
Yeah.
limit my greed in things it's pure greed. Like I'm ideologically and intellectually aligned with Bitcoin, and I know why I'm into it.
Yeah.
And so if I feel greed in conjunction with that, I'm happy to
Yeah.
let it ride. But if it's just greed and there's no ideological, philosophical, intellectual alignment, then I try to step back and say, if it's only on greed, you're going to get burned. You're going
Yeah.
to get in for the wrong reasons. You're not going to get out at the right time. Blah blah blah. Whatever it is. So
Right.
I try to avoid those pitfalls for myself. But
Right, because that's the thing, is if you're getting into stuff where you're going to have to time it because you don't believe in the protocol of the long-term view. And again, like I'm 100% BTC right now, but part of me, like, as the run comes, it's like,
dude,
I might.
if you were in Ripple, right, just for greed, you knew it was a
Yeah.
pile of shit, and
Yeah.
you only want to be in XRP,
But
right?
hang on, hey, caveat though, I wouldn't get into something that I thought was a pile of shit. Like for example, like Ethereum, I have really, really deep concerns about this massive upgrade that they have to do. And yet the amount of institutional money that's coming into that, the amount, like all the tether stuff, all the institutional stuff that's coming in, makes me feel that it's like you can't it's hard to claim that it's illegitimate.
Right. I see what you're saying.
What I mean? it's if ETH were to fail, I mean, I think it would be equally cataclysmic to the space as Bitcoin failing. I mean,
Really?
because ETH is like the holder of the long tail. You know what I mean? Like
Why
it's like
wouldn't, if it failed, why wouldn't everyone just default to Bitcoin? Most of those people hold large positions in Bitcoin anyways.
yeah. I'm not saying Bitcoin would fail if Ethereum did. I just think it would be massively cataclysmic to the space because so much of the rest of the space rides on Ethereum. You know?
Oh, I don't agree with that. I
Yeah.
don't agree with that. And I think,
Yeah.
like in 2017,
Yeah.
look at all the institutional and VC and all this money that came
Yeah.
into everything else.
Yeah.
And then as quick as it came in, it came out. And BTC was affected, of course,
Yeah.
for that and other reasons. But there's always going to be a market for greed. There's
Yeah.
always going to be a market for pure abject greed. And like, I don't want to discredit the people that work on Ethereum because I know there's a lot of like well-intentioned people there,
Yeah.
smart people. Um, I just not sure like if they fully appreciate what Bitcoin represents. If they did, I feel like they may devote their resources toward Bitcoin, like their intellectual and energetic
Yeah.
resources. Um, and I'm not sure they know exactly what they're building. Like if we're trying to do money
Yeah.
over at Bitcoin, the best form of money that's ever existed. And again, like when I talk about this with people and people start saying, yeah, but like Ethereum smart contracts can do this and that and this and that. My response is, do you know how much of a crazy mind-bending revolution having an upgraded form of money on the scale that Bitcoin represents is, like on a civilizational level? Because if you did, you probably wouldn't be rushing toward the next thing after that. You'd probably be really focused on making that ironclad and rock solid, and
Sure.
then being more patient with the iterative process.
Mm-hmm.
And in Ethereum, I just get the sense like there's no real idea of what this thing is supposed to be. And it's
Yeah, but I mean, I like playing devil's advocate again. Like
go for it. Yeah,
I'm 100% BTC. Like I like that. But intellectually, it's fun to tease these things out because
sure.
because BTC, the digital gold narrative didn't come about right away. That narrative has changed
That's true.
over the years. So I don't think that's just if you're building anything and you adjust to the market, that's typically a smart thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So again, but I think if it does give greater rewards, I think it does it because there's greater risk, right? I think there's we both agree that there's they have some major stuff scheduled that keeps getting put off and put off and put off. But I think that there's a lot of people in BTC who underestimate how bad things could get in terms of the market if the U.S. government decided to let's crush.
You mean the market price of Bitcoin? How bad things could get?
Right. Yeah, I mean you're not going to kill Bitcoin, right?
Right.
But I think there's so many people in the space who aren't thinking 12 years out and 15 years out, and they're approaching retirement or whatever, and they're thinking, I could hang in there for 5 years. Well, there's no guarantees that the price of Bitcoin, due to regulatory risk or whatever, could be seriously depressed for many years, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think for that reason, that's another reason why it might be good to have a couple of side bets, or certainly to not to get in over your head, because the greed thing can backfire no matter what you're investing
Oh
in.
yeah, for sure. I
So
think I'm very interested to see how all this plays out, of course. But I wonder if alts pump at all in the next run. Like, what if the market dominance of BTC just goes way up and it's on the order of 90, 95, and all the alts are just left to die, possibly even including Ethereum. I think that's a possibility in the next run. There still seems to be enough misunderstanding of Bitcoin and enough kind of gloss and shine on these other narratives that people are drawn to these other things. But I definitely think it's within the realm of possibility that that happens. But to your point about, people being maybe overly bullish on Bitcoin, I'm torn because you see what's happening in the world, right? And like all of this stuff is what we've been talking about for ages, and this is where something like Bitcoin is not meant to shine immediately, but it is the reason for its existence ultimately, or a big one.
Yeah.
And but what gives me concern is like the kind of, and I feed into this too, don't get me wrong, but like is the kind of like abject bullishness where it's just de facto kind of accepted that in 2 years time Bitcoin's going to be over 100K.
Mhm.
And if I was to bet, I would probably, I'd give that a greater than 50% chance of happening.
Yeah.
But when everything, I'm cautious when people are so sure of something, because that is when the opposite often happens. And so, and as you say, like everything is so, we're in a really strange time now where it seems like nothing is predictable. Like we're really in uncharted waters in so many different areas. And to assume that something is going to happen is, you want to be careful with that. So on the flip side, I think you also want to be careful that you're protecting yourself and that you're kind of staking your territory in this thing if everything continues to kind of, go down the shitter as it is. But, just you got to find your own balance and your own, your own approach to that stuff, because I do get a bit cautious when everyone's just like, oh yeah, of course, 2 years from now. Bing.
So where do you stand on the whole coin join thing? Because that's one of the things that I'm really struggling with, is the idea that I would like to have a portion of my wealth not be fully trackable, right? Like I would like to have some set of anonymity to my Bitcoin holdings, for example, right? So I've got some in my IRA. I know that that's fair game. If the government wants to go after Kingdom Trust or whoever, they can do that. I can't stop that. But the idea of like, there's a lot of even OGs that are like, hey, you want to keep some Cardano or some Monero or some one of those privacy coins that you could shuffle to, or just to kind of diffuse the trail. And like their whole thing with coin join and the fact that you could have tainted coins if you coin join with, at the wrong time with the wrong batch.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you stand on that stuff? Like, it just seems like so much work for such an unclear result. It's like, it feels like you're trading one liability for another.
I know what you mean. Yeah. I mean, it's a bit tricky. I mean, obviously the best approach is to have acquired some coins in a non-KYC fashion, right? From, whether it's a peer-to-peer or whatever. But for most people, that is just too cumbersome, and that's just not what most people do. And then there's some exchanges and stuff that are trying to ameliorate this, like BISC, but liquidity is an issue and fees can be an issue. You might.
Yeah, I mean, you're paying a 20% premium or whatever. It's just like minimum 20% from what I understand.
So, I think as it stands right now, the options available, they're not perfect, but they're better than nothing, I would say. So like, if you buy on a KYC exchange, then sure, coin join your coins, and then, you at least have a leg up, I would think, in most cases.
So, but you might be tainting your coins when you do that.
Yeah, but how could you be any more tainted than having bought them on a KYC exchange?
No, but by tainted, I mean, like if you do a coin join while some criminally marked tokens are coming in, like you're mixing with money from a money laundering or from a kidnapping or a plus token or one of these coins that could basically put a taint on your coin, so that at some point you're limited in if you had to go to an exchange to sell it or something, there's I don't know what other liabilities you have other than just not being able to sell your coins on an exchange.
Have there been cases of that?
Yeah, I mean, like BlockFi just
but that was
They
you
got an
couldn't
earful.
send, yeah, you couldn't send CoinJoin coins to them, right? They just said no.
Right, and they got they got a shitload of heat for that,
Yeah,
and I think that's if BlockFi can do that, then Coinbase can do that, and Kraken can do that, especially if they're commanded to flag or deny these types of transactions by the government, right?
right. But was that like sending from Wasabi, for example, directly?
I don't
Is
think so.
that
I
how
think
they?
I think somehow the coins were known as coin joined,
Yeah.
and there's a certain signature, an aspect of the signature that flags a coin as something that was potentially coin joined or something like that. I'm
Yeah.
not a tech guy, but that's
I'd
kind of
like
what
to look into the details of that case specifically more because I only just, got my information from it on Twitter. But like,
right.
fungibility may indeed, become an issue, but
Yeah,
I don't know. You got to strike your own balance, and maybe
yeah,
you end up having, some that are you coin join and some that are kind of like
yeah.
these
And
are
but
my not.
is that something? Do you use CoinJoin? Do you use Wasabi or because it's extra work and there's also chances of failure when you use those things, right? Like there are some failure risks to those.
Yeah, I can't confirm or deny, but
Yeah,
I'm a fan
yeah,
of those services,
I
and
got you.
I wonder, like
Like,
the
do you know a lot of people that do it? I mean, I know Matt Odell does it. There's a few people that really cheerlead it, but what percentage of OGs are actually like really using that?
I
What if
don't
you had to guess? If you had to
I
guess,
if I had to guess, because this is something that a lot of people probably rightly keep private, but if I had to guess, I kind of think a decent chunk do, to be
yeah,
honest. Now
yeah,
maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's kind of becoming best practice, like on
yeah.
the way to becoming best practice. So um, I don't know. It's of course I have no idea, but this will probably involve like we're going to get into scenarios where like every transaction is just default a coin join sort
Yeah,
of
or I guess I was reading about CoinSwap today. Apparently, that's
right.
I mean that's I guess quite a ways off, but it's interesting that it could be automated and better.
Yeah, and we were talking about something along these lines on the Bitcoin Magazine live stream last night, and people were saying like what one of the scenarios that could unfold is, or would it be bad for Bitcoin if, like, now that Antifa is labeled a terrorist organization, if the banks cut them off and they therefore go to Bitcoin because they don't get service from the banks, and then Bitcoin gets like tainted by being involved with them, that would be bad for Bitcoin because
Right.
there'd be some regulatory reaction. I think we just have to assume, like, I think it's totally possible that Bitcoin's trajectory has less friction than the hardcore like adversarial types think, right? It could just be held by a broad portion of policymakers and their own greed and blah blah blah, the greed of Wall Street, etc., means that it doesn't get quite the crackdown or pushback that you might have initially thought. Alter,
Yeah,
alter,
yeah. I mean
alternative.
the ultimate answer to that is if you can just get Goldman Sachs to invest in Bitcoin, then our troubles are over because they pretty much own the government.
Right.
So
Alternatively, if that's not the case and there is a huge pushback, like I think then it just falls into the category of, well, this is kind of the expected trajectory from day one. Like, I don't think anyone who got into the space anticipated that, the greatest power that's ever existed on Earth, i.e., the ability to create money out of thin air, will be given up willingly.
right.
There'll probably be a tremendous amount of pushback to try to preserve that. Having said that, that system is probably going to destroy itself. It'll probably implode at some point. Now, I'm not suggesting that's going to happen next month because we all know that these things can persist far longer than we might have thought rationally that they could. But yeah, I mean, I presume the timing is everything, but there could be a tremendous amount of pushback, in which case I think there should be like people should have contingencies sort of for those.
Yeah, yeah.
And then if not, then happy days. It wasn't the battle you thought it was going to be.
Yeah, yeah, that whole thing, like the game theory aspect of it, like how many countries are or central banks, or nefarious leaders are really starting to put the Bitcoin ace up their sleeve. Like I'm dying to know who's accumulating, which government is going to fire the first shot,
Yeah.
and is it going to be, because it can literally save a country's finances, like in Argentina or something like that. If they moved in quietly, but stealthily, but in a major way, it could, like, it would, start the domino effect that, if Russia bans Bitcoin, Argentina's not going to give a damn. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's like,
And
I don't know. I'm fascinated by that whole dynamic. Are we going to see one of those shoes drop, in this next cycle?
well, that's the juicy anticipation of the game theory, right? Like, how is the game theory going to play out? Because if you're like a small country and you run a surplus and you don't benefit at all from, the central bank's ability to create money, really, because the US dollar is, basically the world's reserve currency. So you don't have that much to gain. But if you, and by surplus, I mean just like you compete in the market and you make more than you expend, then I think it makes a ton of sense, to accumulate Bitcoin, to put some of them in your reserves, even if it's a small portion. Maybe in your reserves you have some gold and some Bitcoin and some USD or whatever. But it's just as if nothing less than a hedge, I think it makes sense. But also, even in the cases like, take China, right? Nobody would expect that they would do that. But if you're a country that can compete well on the global economy, in broadly compete well, like, because most countries have been victims of US dollar hegemony for a long time, right? It's a super unfair advantage that the US has had. And if you think you can compete well, like if you think productivity per hour of productivity per hour of productivity, the dynamism of your economy, the innovativeness, all that kind of stuff, if you think you can compete on the global market, then I almost think you should want a global, like, hard, nonpartisan, effectively, currency that doesn't benefit any one country, because then it's just a real game of who deserves it more. And like, I think of a country like China, like, and I lived in China for 10 years. They compete well. Like, I know they've benefited from, everyone is trying to carve out their niche advantage in this current world that we have. But the bottom line is they're organized, they're innovative, their eyes on the ball, and they
have leadership that can make decisions like this without having to fuss about it. Whereas, like, if the U.S., like, let's say a senator wanted the U.S. to start investing in Bitcoin, like, it wouldn't fly. There's just no way. If the president wanted to do it, there are all these machines that, these political machines that have to turn for something like this to happen, unless you do it surreptitiously through the CIA or the FBI or something like that. But like, I think, that's where I think dictatorships have this huge advantage of, like, you've got, a leader.
You can do whatever you want with state funds.
If you're MBS in Saudi Arabia, if you're, Putin or whoever, or Xi or whatever, it's effortless, right? But any democratic country, I think the democratic countries are at a disadvantage here, because there's, like, who's going to agree to get into this wacky internet money, right?
100%. And that, that's, for better or for worse, politics aside, that is part of the reason why China's been so agile and been able to grow so quickly, because a decision is made and the next day they start. There's no back and forth. And if I'm China, yes, of course, you're going to have to give up the advantages that are conveyed by having a central bank that you control, and that you can manipulate currency, you can issue currency, all that. That obviously conveys some domestic advantages, but it doesn't convey that many international advantages when the dollar hegemon is out there controlling everything. Right. So you give up a little bit here, but on the backside, you create a level playing field where you're Michael Jordan. Like, you want a level playing field if you're a top performer.
Yeah, but if you're early, it's not even a level. You've totally tilted the playing field the other way. It's not level.
That's the game theory. It's like, who's going to catch on to that the quickest and be like, oh, okay, there's a big advantage to be gained by being early here. And obviously central banks all around the world already accumulate gold, and China and Russia, et cetera, have been doing a lot of that over the last few years. And everyone just thinks that like that's normal, and accumulating Bitcoin is so absurd. But once you see that it's the same action, it's just that, in my opinion, Bitcoin is a better form of hard money.
Sure.
Like, why wouldn't a central bank, if they agreed with that premise, also be accumulating Bitcoin? Because it's the same strategy as accumulating gold, just an even better one, because it's
Right.
a more functional and a better form of money.
Yeah. Yeah. The game theory gets pretty wild when you start thinking that, there's a core group of developers handling this money, and yeah, it's like it's distributed, and if a handful of them had to go or disappeared or whatever, there'd be others to take their place. But it's hard to imagine, like, if somebody like Putin were to get Russia into Bitcoin, that he wouldn't be
Co-opting developers and stuff like that.
doing something. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think like, hey, I'm a nation state, I'm just going to trust these random dudes that are running this computer network. It's distributed, whatever, but still, we know that there's always a core group of people who are sort of, I'm sure they've got all kinds of fail safes, and if Bitcoin gets attacked, they're not going to have a democratic meeting. There's a plan, right? If Bitcoin gets attacked, there's a plan in place. We don't know who's in charge of the plan, but we know that there's contingency plans that we don't know about for Bitcoin.
Right. And ultimately, if you run your own node, then if someone tries to switch up the rules, then you have a certain degree of choice of not being involved in that.
Right, but there's got to be communication amongst these nodes for everybody to know who's doing what, and why are we stopping this? Like, what, there's got to be a coordinated effort to get all the nodes on board, just like there was with the SegWit thing, right? It's just like
right.
This stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. There are channels, whether they're what do you call it, flexible or
protocols or something.
Yeah, you know what I mean. It's just like there are formal or informal channels, right? And if it's truly distributed, there's not really a formal channel. It has to be sort of informal.
Right.
So yeah, there's there's a little bit of that mystery of how things would go down if a nation state decided to attack the network.
100%. And part of Bitcoin's architecture and its security layer is a social layer, and that's uncomfortable for some people, and rightly so, because gold doesn't require anyone's permit. It doesn't require anybody to say what it is. Like, it's gold, and it will be gold always. Yeah. But even like the 21 million hard cap, right? Like, we've established absolute scarcity, and I think like a lot of people say, I think you've got to have it in one instance or no instances. I don't think you can just have it in a million different instances, because then it loses its specialness, it loses its value.
I'm not sure what you mean by that. You're saying 21 million?
Yeah, so the 21 million hard cap of Bitcoin, right?
Right, but you're saying it can only be in one instance. You're saying like other copies of Bitcoin, or what? Or
yeah, that's what I mean. Like, okay. I think other cryptos, like, who also have a hard cap, I don't think that. Well, first of all, just from a technical perspective and the size of the network and the security of the network, I think their hard cap is more corruptible right now. But even like if it were very similar, I think we have to coalesce around one absolute scarcity if we're
right. The network effect is already there. Yeah,
right.
Network effect is already there. That's almost
But the point about the social thing is, like, if we all wanted to change the hard cap, we could.
Yeah.
Right. And so that social consensus, that social consensus is a part of it, and that's kind of uncomfortable because we're so enamored, and rightly so, with this idea of absolute scarcity. The first instantiation of like an absolute scarcity you can actually engage with beyond your own subjective experience of time. That's a big deal. But it's uncomfortable to know that is it, I know the questions arise. Is it real if it's just something we're deciding to maintain, to establish? And I say, yes, it is real, for that very reason, but we're not used to having maybe so much control over something like this. We just looked out in nature and things were what they were, especially in the form of money. Like gold is gold. Like
Yeah.
can't do anything about it. Its properties are its properties.
It's
With
funny.
Bitcoin,
It's kind of yin yang. We have control over not being in control because it's, the limit is set at 20 million. And, to the extent that we can, having the hard cap means you can't control the supply, right? And so it's kind of a yin yang thing. Like we have,
but if we don't, what I'm saying is we could choose to not respect the hard cap and
right,
change it.
right.
But if we do that, we destroy any semblance or any opportunity at absolute scarcity that we might have had. Because if we break it once in this best, attempt, then what's to stop us from doing it every other time we try it?
Right, right. And then you're back in the fiat world at that point.
Right. And nobody wants to be back in that world.
Yeah.
So
is that really like, if you think about it, is that like the core value of Bitcoin? Is that promise has not been broken yet? It's the promise has not yet been broken.
That's definitely one of the main ones. Yeah. That like, I think whatever Bitcoin becomes, and of course, whether it's on the base layer or on subsequent layers, there's going to be so much functionality that, that being programmable money is going to be amazing, because we will actually be able to program in the properties that we want of the money, which is, mind blowing in itself. But if the core value prop of it is not maintained, then none of it matters. So if that hard cap is not maintained, nothing. It becomes, everything's based on a pile of sand, basically. It's just.
So I'm curious though, when you think about the hard cap and you talk about, how Bitcoin, I think a lot of people are happy. They're happy to see it financialized and have derivatives and all these kinds of things, and that leads to rehypothecation. And so, how real is that hard cap when it turns into
some other financial instrument?
Exponentially growing amount of derivatives represented by that Bitcoin, right?
Well, I don't think it changes at all, because you're not changing the amount of actual Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
You're not increasing the amount of Bitcoin, which is the important part. But
to what extent does that matter? If a huge hedge fund wants Bitcoin, wants to own Bitcoin, but then discovers they can just have exposure to Bitcoin instead, right? Then all the Bitcoin owners forego the price appreciation of that hedge fund actually having to buy, if it had to buy Bitcoin to get exposure.
But how would they, tell me how they get the exposure?
Through derivatives.
Right. So tell me the structure.
So, I mean, it's all through leverage, right? It's like are you saying they have to buy at least some, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Someone along the way would, right?
I guess. I mean, I've not dealt with options, but the rehypothecation thing is something that I'd like to learn more about in terms of, can it have the same effect as an unlimited cap? Or at least a softer limit on the cap.
I don't think so, because ultimately because you can't create more. It's kind of like paper gold, right?
Yeah. Or like the euro dollar, right? Like we can't control how much euro dollar is out there.
Right.
And so we're having to pump US dollars in swaps to confront the issue that's going. I mean, I know it's a totally different system, but I'm just wondering if some of those principles would apply.
I think at some point, like, you have to settle in the underlying.
Yeah.
Ultimately, or you may just get wrecked, because like if you have a bunch of derivatives that gives you exposure to Bitcoin, but your only obligation is to pay the bearer the price of Bitcoin at whatever time, and you don't necessarily have to own Bitcoin to provide that return to that investor.
Yeah.
then one of the methods, and maybe the most effective method of not being wrecked in that scenario, is actually to have the underlying so that you can actually fulfill that claim.
Yeah, and I'm swimming out of my depths here, but I just, the idea is that rehypothecation leads to uh, fake stuff being created. Like, there's way more shares of Apple stock outstanding than actually are accounted for, just because trading desks and brokerages and
But is there actually more shares, or is there more
they sell more.
exposure?
No, I think they actually sell more stock than actually exists, like the same stock, because nobody holds their own. And I guess that's the difference with Bitcoin, right? You can actually hold your coins, but with
And are you saying it's an auditability problem, like people don't know the supply?
yeah, exactly. With stock certificates, I mean, I remember my dad's broker talking about just the fact that the same certificate could be sold multiple times because nobody ever holds their own paper, right? It holds their own.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of financial fuckery out there in the legacy markets, because the financial engineering over the last 40 years has been tremendous. But I don't think you'll ever get around the fact that, like, if you don't have your Bitcoin, you
Right.
don't
90 days, right.
you don't own any Bitcoin.
Right,
And if you have your Bitcoin and you can verify that you have your Bitcoin,
Yeah.
you got Bitcoin. And there's only 21 million of them that
Right.
exist in that capacity. So, like, I'm sure there'll be all sorts of people trying that kind of stuff, and maybe some of it will even be good for financial markets and the way to use Bitcoin. But the whole point is that, unlike gold, right? Like, I can create a bunch of dollars and say they're all backed by, I sell them at $35 per ounce of gold. But as we know, that wasn't the case even before 1971. And
Right.
so, that's why they had to say, like, we better shut this shit down, because if everyone came back looking for gold, we don't have enough. And the reason is because you have that, because the money is separate from the asset that's backing it. And with Bitcoin, the money is the asset that's backing it. And that, hopefully eliminates a lot of that risk.
Have you, do you find yourself getting more or less aggressive in terms of turning your friends on to Bitcoin?
Oh man.
Are you just kind of like, because everybody's got to find that level of like, I don't know.
I go back and forth, man. Like, at first you're more on the aggressive side, and then I went more like Zen, whatever, to each their own. But, and like, I'll preface this by saying, obviously I might be wrong. This is what gives me pause.
Yeah.
But I see what's happening in the world, and I have my own like predictions, I guess, of how bad things could get. Like, I feel like I see the writing on the wall fairly clearly. And of course we discuss this stuff in the space all the time. And I want friends and loved ones to be protected, like, I want them to have at least some hedge against the craziness that seems like it's on its way. And so that causes me to be a bit more like, I mostly do it playfully now. I don't go up to anyone and sit them down seriously, like, listen, you've got to get yourself. I more bring it up in a playful manner, like, I say Bitcoin fixes this a lot, or I'll I'll just talk about it. I'll bring it up, and people kind of know me as that person right now. So occasionally they'll have questions, and I see that as a doorway to go into like a 30-minute rant about it and stuff like that. But I mostly have fun with it, and at the end of the day, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So, what do you do? What about you?
Well, I'm actually trying to passively put it out there. So, like, on my Facebook profile, I've got a bunch of friends on Facebook or whatever, and it just quietly says in my little banner, like, Bitcoin tech help. Like, I don't want to sell people Bitcoin,
right?
But if people are interested in it and have questions and want advice on whether or not to get a hard wallet, how to move the coins, where, which exchanges to use, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be, again, I want to be the help that I didn't get when I first got into this, and stop people from just, either going in too heavy, or, buying one of each from the menu. I think those are the kinds of things that'll make a difference. But I don't want to be the guy that talked somebody into buying Bitcoin.
Right. I mean, it's a big responsibility, and you know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, actually, that's a lie. I do want to be the guy that talked you into getting Bitcoin, but I don't know how that turns out for you,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I think it's going to turn out awesome, but I don't know for sure. And when you talk about people's finances, their livelihood, I can tell you, like, there's a personal cost. I mean, you know this. You fall down the rabbit hole, and you wind up spending a little less time on your job because you're just so freaking passionate about Bitcoin, and you just, like, let's,
See how far the rabbit hole goes.
yeah, it's been a long time since I've had such insatiable desire to learn about something,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
and the rabbit hole doesn't just take you into Bitcoin. You have to learn about all the things that don't work. Then you have to learn about the financial system, and you go as deep as you can. Um, but yeah, it's just such a fascinating space, and it's really hard not to be the idiot at the cocktail party who won't shut up about Bitcoin. But I'm becoming more and more disciplined, and I think, like, for me, the big thing is, like, if you have to do it, like, give yourself 40 seconds and then shut up.
Right.
And if they don't ask another question, move on.
Yeah. Well, that's a good rule. That's a good rule
Like,
because I find myself I think I'm going in the more overt direction. Like I'm less I'm less shy about it now. You know, like I just and to the point about like being responsible for someone's financial loss, or it's obviously it's so critically important and you don't want to carry that burden. So usually I can give my hardest core spiel, and then some people will be like, I'm in, like, let's go. And then I'm like, no, 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 small amounts on
yeah,
a daily or weekly or monthly basis, whatever's comfortable. That's how you do it. And you accumulate a position over time. Don't try to time, don't trade. This is how you get in. So I go like kind of full blast on the sale, and then I
yeah,
pull the reins back and I'm like, just take it easy,
yeah,
take it easy, because it's you learn as you go.
right.
And once like all our job is to get people's kind of foot in the door, like get $100 worth of sats in your pocket, and
Yeah.
then you're paying attention, and then you're learning a bit, and then you're going down the rabbit hole and you're asking questions, and then you're on your own. And then if you want to bet the
And
farm on it, then go for
then they call you and ask about Chainlink.
it. Yeah. But I just, like, as you say, so intellectually stimulating, haven't been so eager to learn, especially in realms that aren't my wheelhouse usually. Like
Yeah.
I was never a technology
What was your
person.
background? What was your
Well, I
background?
worked in finance in the original part of my career, and then I worked in medicine in the latter part, the most recent part. And I've always been interested in a broad variety of topics, but like tech was probably the furthest away from me, beyond just being kind of interested in future innovation, like,
Yeah.
futurist sort of stuff. But I wasn't technically inclined. But definitely this has caused me to not be so presumptive about my inability to understand those things, and just slowly read
Yeah.
the lines, consider
Yeah.
them, read them again, consider them, and go through the process. And what you find is, like, of course there's some hardcore stuff in this space, but a lot of it is not as intimidating as I thought
Right.
prior. And so it's so intellectually stimulating, and the discourse and the people that you come across in the space. And it gets a bad rap, and on the surface it might look crazy and toxic and whatever, but there's a lot of really good people in this space, and a lot of really intelligent people in the space, and there's much to be learned and gained from them. And so I just find myself being so enthusiastic and bullish on so many different aspects of it, that I genuinely, and I think there's like a behavioral aspect of this, obviously running in the background, that may be the biggest aspect of all this. And as it's so often said on Bitcoin Twitter, like, I find myself having difficulty talking about anything else, because everything else seems so mundane, that, like, I want to talk about this because it's so much more meaningful than a lot of other things. So I'm kind of just accepting that, like, I'm gonna cheekily bring it up, and once I reel people in, then I pull the reins and just tell them to take it slow, and then they're on their own.
Yeah, I think my line. I found something today. Actually, one of the better. articles I've seen in some time about really like how when you introduce people to the concept of Bitcoin, it's really easy to get sidetracked into, okay, you know, uh, uh, what do you call it? A new block every 10 minutes.
Right,
And,
right.
and, you know, and they're 21 million cap and all these kinds of things. And it's really easy to geek out on people without giving them the why. But the thing that's tough about the why is like, how do you give them the why without
A history
acting,
lesson.
well, that or acting like you, or making them think you've got a tinfoil hat on and you're waiting for the end of the world.
Right, right.
So, but the guy's name is Sylvain Sorel. I don't have the link to it, but anyway, it was just like it's a Medium post that basically introduce or gets you to introduce people with the why in a kind of an easy way. And it's
Do you remember what he said?
man, I can find it and send it to you. But essentially, you know, he touched on a couple of points. One of which is, you know, the eroding value of the U.S. dollar. It's not so much like it's obvious. It's the obvious stuff, but it's just the way he did it
Yeah.
was very accessible to somebody who's not a money or a tech geek. But you know, and I think that that's important. Finding a way to talk to people in their language, and getting them to be interested in the why before you get into the how.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. And I think what's gone on over the last 2 or 3 months, especially with Money Printer Go Burr, like that one, a lot of people are starting to perk up their ears. Or even if they're not, when you ask them and say, like, why can the government print $4 trillion? Like,
Mm.
do you think that's fair? How does that process work? Like,
Right.
a lot of people, I'm finding, at least in the conversations I have, because you're right, you can easily be perceived as being a tinfoil hat person by talking about a lot of the different aspects of this. But most people understand that they work hard for the money, and why is there a group of people over here that doesn't have to work hard for money?
Right.
And that's kind of the line that I've been finding is kind of a doorway in lately. Like, especially when you hear headlines of 2, 3, however many $1 trillion in stimulus or bailouts or quantitative easing or whatever, people just start going like, where does the money come from? Because
Right.
people weren't really asking that before, because, like, unless you're really into finance, you just thought things work, I guess. My life is normal, I don't think about these things. But when you see the word trillion on the news and headlines most days, or many days in the last couple of months, people just go like, well, that's a lot of money, where'd that come from?
Right. Right.
How's the government sending UBI checks to everybody? Where'd they get that money? So
Right.
I think that's probably going to accelerate. And especially, like, I mean, I think in the US, I wouldn't be surprised if UBI came down the pike pretty quick, or, whether they do it through those debit cards with the Fed or the Treasury or whatever the hell is going on. But, they're going to pull out all the stops to paper over these problems.
I
And
tell you, if they normalize it, they can't stop it.
right,
Once
right.
people get 3 or 4 or 5 checks, that's gonna be incredibly hard. And for me, like the biggest argument against Yang, who a lot of people in this space really appreciate him, and certainly he was ahead of the curve if we're going towards UBI. But the idea is like when you look at incentives, right? And if the U.S. policy is to send people checks, then who are you going to vote for at election time? The guy who wants to increase the checks, or the guy who wants to reduce the checks?
Right.
You know,
It's like it becomes the only issue. What are you doing to the checks? More or
yeah,
less. That's all we
yeah.
care about.
So it's another game theory aspect of that is like, how do you establish UBI in a way that it doesn't become the only issue of every damn election?
Yeah. Look, I think it's a doomed effort either way. And to the extent, like, I'm not really for or against it. I think it's asinine, but, like, I understand the reasoning and the context of the environment we're in. But, like, I would see it mostly through the lens of being an accelerationist. or an accelerant for things, because like, of course money doesn't grow on trees. You can't just print money and give it to people and expect everything's going to be fine. But I think they're probably going to try it because that's how fucking crazy everything is right now. And that's how desperate, this system is to maintain itself.
Yeah.
I just think it will cause things to unravel more quickly. And I mean, I say that's a good thing because I seek the advent of Bitcoin more rapidly because of all the benefits I think will accrue to the world and individuals as a result. But maybe you don't want to wish it too rapidly because perhaps it's not ready for prime time yet. So
yeah. So what's one thing that Bitcoin doesn't fix?
well, I'm sure there's a lot, but
The
you'd have to
top
list
of mind.
things off, and I'd say yes or no. I was gonna say Bitcoin doesn't fix like mental health and stuff, but I actually think it does. So um,
Yeah, or at least some of it, right? It's not going to stop
yeah. Well, I think a huge
multiple
part of
personalities.
sure, but so yeah, maybe that's the answer. But I think Bitcoin represents a future world that is more fair, um, and more prosperous and more hopeful and more innovative and more all of the good stuff that we know it holds. And I think a lot of part of the anguish or stress or depression that a lot of people have today is a sense of hopelessness. They get up in the world and they don't see a brighter future on the horizon. They don't want to engage in the world as it is. They and so that if you could flip the switch and get them to perceive the future as being more positive, then that would actually have a material effect on their mental health day to day. So I think that and then this is like, I talked to a ton of Bitcoiners about this, and a lot of Bitcoiners were hopeless, nihilistic, depressed, wandering, kind of lacking meaning in their life. And they came into the space, and little by little, they learned, they changed, they learned, change, learn, change, learn, change, and to the point where now, like, they're some of the most positive, excited, enthusiastic people you could find, and they want to, you know, make themselves ready for the world to come, and they're improving themselves, their health, their families, it's a really amazing behavioral phenomenon that's occurring as a result of just learning about and interacting with this digital abstraction.
Yeah, and just imagine if all that talent was just one more person in a cubicle at Facebook trying to get you to click the like button. You know, I mean,
Dystopia, man. Dystopia.
I can tell you that for me, it's like Bitcoin has turned me into a saver like never before. I got caught flat-footed with this economic crash. It crushed my business, and I was not ready. And I just
Yeah.
that is never fucking happening to me again. Like, I'm getting my shit together.
Yeah.
And I will not be caught without cash, without in that situation ever again. And I think Bitcoin, if you're investing rationally and not above your means or whatever, at this time when you have this confluence of so many people who are not spending money, they're like, fuck it, they're saving their money, and all of a sudden there's this technology that enables to not lose 2% of that money every year. So I think
way more. 2% is being generous.
Right. But at least the mandate is 2%.
Right.
So to discover a savings technology right at the moment where everybody is trying to save more is really kind of cool.
Yeah, very. And as kind of pessimistic as it sounds, and I think this could even happen to many of the larger developed countries, but let's just say that usually when this kind of turmoil kicks off, it's amplified in the kind of periphery countries around the world where things are far less stable. So a little more instability is magnified there than in the more,
Sure.
Stable places. People picking up sticks and going elsewhere to build a better life is going to be on the increase. Yeah. And I think, obviously Bitcoin is a tremendous resource in that capacity too, because you bring your gold across the border, and those people they'll take it right off you before they send you packing if they let you out at all.
Right.
Whereas with Bitcoin, you take it across with you, where you wind up wherever you wind up, and you start over, and your wealth is intact, and you can, you can start anew. So, that's just another example of how its value prop and its usefulness is revealed in times of when the existing system is showing how, um, ineffective, fragile, authoritarian, it actually is.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that especially in the U.S. and Western Europe, the bubble that we're in terms of uh, the ease of the financial situation, the financial system for us compared to people in Iran, people
Right.
in Argentina, people in or people like in what's the island, Cyprus, where they got the haircut in the middle of the night, and their assets were shaved significantly. I forget what it was, but half of it was gone or something like that. Just
Yeah. And
uh,
was it Greece or Cyprus where anything over like a certain amount in your savings account was just like nationalized, basically?
yeah, so that was Cyprus.
Right.
That
Right.
was Greece has had some stuff too, and they might have had something similar. But yeah, just the idea that can happen to you. Once that happens to you once, I mean, people in Argentina have had it a few times, but yeah, I think the older generations certainly put money under the mattress. Uh,
It's just about awareness at this point, and education, I think. But like, because the problems are being felt, around the world in different pockets, and people, as you say, like once it burns you, you're going to say, "Hey, how can I make sure this doesn't happen again?"
yeah,
And all it takes is you to stumble upon, you know, Orange Coin, and to say, "Oh," and to start looking at it and say, Actually, this might be part of a solution." You
yeah.
know?
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating couple of years. It's like we're like everybody, we're all at the starting line and waiting for the gun, and uh,
And we don't realize the race has already started. That's I think about it that way a lot of times too. Like we've
but
always
it
been
feels like it's paused. It feels like the race is paused right now. It's like we're
I,
all expecting the big run, but it might not start for another 8 months. We just don't know.
yeah, I know what you mean, but I also like, so, it's so, the current moment and the status quo has such a intoxicating effect on people. Like it's so hard to realize the times you're in. We always look out on the world and we're observing, and we kind of wait for it to go from one state to another without realizing that it's just always in flux, and it's
Right,
always unfolding, and it's happening now. It's just maybe not the thing that you're expecting to happen now, but something is
right.
happening now. And so I have to sometimes consciously get in that space to try to, if it's even possible at all, gain some objective perspective on like where we are and like
Mhm.
what may happen, because all these crazy things that are happening, like even a year ago you'd say that is like far out, like that, that's not going to happen anytime soon, but here we
Right,
are. And what
right.
does it mean that we're here, and what does it mean for 6 months from now that we're here now? And no answers, but it's hard to gain clarity in this world, but try as we might to do so.
Yeah, it's just
Uh,
I mean, the operating emoji is the rocket ship, and you spend an hour or two a day looking at rocket ship emojis. You're like, come on, let's go. you know.
and then it goes up over 10K and down over 10K and up over 10K and down. Yeah.
So I think we're conditioning ourselves to be anxious and impatient. But if Bitcoin doesn't teach you patience, I don't know what will,
Well,
right?
that's true. It's going to be a great teacher one way or the other. So try to make it a good, one that supports you and benefits you.
Yeah.
Speaking of, and this we'll shut it down after this, but what do you think Bitcoin's looking at doing in the next 12 months?
Um, for me, like the next 4 or 5 months are totally up for grabs because we could be on the verge of the next leg down with the stock market. There could be the sort of Great Depression pattern. We're at peak euphoria right now. Everybody thinks we're going to all-time highs everywhere, and
Crazy.
so I'm sort of braced for that. I'm actually, in terms of Bitcoin, I could lean a little. If we get prices back down into the 8,000s, I'll probably lean in a little bit more. Otherwise, like I'm fully allocated in terms of what's reasonable. So I think it'd be, for me, it'd be I'd feel good about an opportunity to dip in one more time.
Mm-hmm.
But I am really just anxious to sort of fulfill that narrative and to start seeing it grind up, 10, 20% per month. And I think that, just, the longer we wait, the faster the run is going to have to happen. But I put a lot of stock in the stock to flow model and the S2FX. I really makes a lot of sense to me. And the thing that's not in the model is the fact that like the value of gold, the big gold dot on that chart, is in a fixed place at the current market cap. But the market cap of gold could double in the next 18 months. So what does that do to your stock to flow model then? If S2FX, whatever, if the stock to flow of Bitcoin is the same as gold roughly, and we're looking at trying to catch up to gold as a minimum, because these types of movements tend to overshoot and then come back down. So we could be in for some serious fireworks, but also not. We could go 6 months of depression and it just sort of stagnates everything. Nobody's got money to invest, and then maybe the US bans Bitcoin. Maybe there's enough energy starts going into there that they just start feeling threatened by it. Who knows? So I'm braced for the worst, but I'd be surprised if we don't get at least to the S2FX value by the end of next year. So I think we'll hit that. I don't know if we'll, but that might be the top instead of twice S2FX, which is what you would expect.
Right.
If we run sort of true to form. So, but yeah, it's pretty exciting to think that a Bitcoin could be $500,000 in 18 months. But I don't doubt the possibility. Just like 8 years ago, if you told people that, because the data was there, you could have shown somebody S2FX 7 years ago and shown them that Bitcoin was going to 20,000, and they would have laughed at you. And so it's very easy to feel like we're probably in a similar spot now.
Yeah. The thing with S2FX is like, it almost seems too good to be true, right? Like that it could be so like, and anytime when you get everyone thinking, oh yeah, like this is the roadmap, then that's when it zigs when you thought it was going to zag. But to your point, like, I agree. Like, I'm equally apprehensive that, once we have the rolling bankruptcies across the economy, and once like all the companies in the stock market that are reaching all-time highs are coming out with their earnings and they're absolutely devastated, like, will we just see another and maybe prolonged meltdown? Yeah. And that's a definite risk. But on the other hand, like the central banks of the world seem to have shown their hand and saying, we're not going to let that happen. And if that continues to be the case, even if things melt anyways, earnings and bankruptcies and stuff, if they just decide that they're going to go burr on it all, then I can't see how a lot of that doesn't wind up in Bitcoin out of rational economic actors saying, I better convert some of this burr money into Bitcoin because nothing else really makes sense. Not a lot of other things are making sense. So I think
it could be, you're right. It could be an accelerant.
Yeah.
And again, which adds more and more plausibility to that S2FX model. And I don't have romantic notions that that's going to play out for 30 years. But all models are wrong, but some are useful. And I think there's a good chance that this one's going to be not just useful in terms of being accurate, but also becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. Once Bitcoin gets over 100 grand, and I pretty comfortable saying that that's going to happen. Once Bitcoin gets over 100 grand, and everybody's looking at it, and all these really smart people start looking at S2FX, and more and more people are going to buy into that as a logical prediction of where price could go.
Right.
And so just by existing, that model could have a self-fulfilling prophecy sort of aspect to it, because I don't think any of us plausibly thought that Bitcoin was going to go to $500,000 before that model came out. Like nobody thought it was going to happen in the next 24 months.
Right.
But now there's a lot of people that think, you know what, this shit could actually happen.
Right.
You know, I mean, before that came out, I would have been thrilled if Bitcoin would get to 40 or 50,000 in the next cycle. I would have been thrilled.
Mm-hmm.
Now my expectations are off the charts.
Now you're going to be disappointed at 50K Bitcoin.
And the government's playing along. It's like, oh, okay, you need more money. Here you go.
Right.
So, everybody's saying it. It's just like you couldn't have planned a better situation for Bitcoin to grow up in,
Yeah.
So we'll see. But yeah, I certainly feel good about it long term. I'd love to. I've already talked about alts to piss off the maximalists out there. I'll point out one more thing.
Oh.
I would love to have the opportunity to recoup everything I've put into Bitcoin, take some profits, and then be playing with house money for the rest of my life.
House money in alts.
What's that?
You mean playing? Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So if Bitcoin gets to, let's say 50K, I can start pulling a little bit out every month or so as an insurance policy, kind of getting my original investment back. And then, from then on, Bitcoin will be house, I will have eliminated the possibility of losing.
Sure. But the big question is, if such a time occurs, what do you get out into?
Buying a house. I don't own a house.
Buying a house.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
So that's what I'd like to do is pull, pull a chunk out.
Well, yeah. And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I think for, the as is often said, like with that narrative, for people that are thinking that way, presuming they don't have, like a large asset that's, critical to living that they want to procure through the gains, is like you want to sell. If Bitcoin reaches 100K, 200K, then the landscape in which it's operating is probably going to look pretty scary. And like, will you really want to exit out into equities or to, a currency of any kind, if that's what's going on? Because those assets could look a lot more riskier than they do now, if that were the case.
Yeah, for me, the Bitcoin is I'm not quite like Pompliano in terms of percentages, but it's a good, in terms of investments, I don't have a broad spectrum of investments. So I'm heavily into Bitcoin more than most people would be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So, and actually, more than I'd be comfortable long term. I think the longer this goes, the more successful Bitcoin becomes, the more risks it will have from state attacks and those kinds of things. So I'm going to want to pull out at least a chunk. I like to say I'm not smart enough or dumb enough to be a trader, So, to me, that's the aspect of timing. There's a certain number I have in mind. And once it gets to that, I'll start pulling out a little bit every month. So dollar cost average out, right?
Right.
Over time. And, diversify into other investments, whether it's a house or something else. So, yeah, I would like for that to happen sooner than later. I'd like to have the opportunity to do that next year.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I can't imagine not being in it, like, like I don't think, I'll be in it definitely until there's an economy where you can go and buy a cup of coffee with your Bitcoin,
Yeah.
or a coffee shop, go buy a coffee shop with your Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you there. Fran, this has been fun, man. I
Yeah, I appreciate it.
really enjoyed the conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time. Any last words before we shut this thing down?
No, I mean, we talked about Bitcoin a bunch. Really, the only other thing that's fascinating me is the house concerts things that I do. So if people are interested in music and independent artists, they can look up listeningroomnetwork.com.
Mm-hmm.
And on Twitter, I'm at crypto artists.
Oh yeah,
And
what was the thing about what was your you put a female
oh
photo
yeah,
up the other day. What was that about?
so I noticed, in the past few years, there's a handful of guys that use a
Female
female
avatar or photo
avatar,
to get more
right,
followers.
to get more followers, and I wanted to see how effective that was. Like, if you look at my Twitter, like I don't have a lot of followers. I'm kind of new to this, and I don't really chase it, but
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to see what it's like, and also, you know, you keep hearing about the shit that women have to deal with on Twitter in terms of
DMs and shit. Like,
yeah, the DMs and all that. So
yeah.
I wanted to see, like, how bad is it? So I put that up there, and certainly it helped engagement. But I didn't get any wacky DMs. No guys were hitting on me, so that was
You
fine.
didn't get the open dime dick? Did you see that?
I saw that. I saw
So good.
I saw what would be a fun case study is because he had 10 followers. So like look up who those followers are. Like you like what kind of person, I don't know. Like if
Look, I gotta say, if I was a girl and I was into Bitcoin and some dude like he didn't show his actual dick, it was under the pants,
yeah,
so it had some class, is what I'm trying to say. So if he had sent that and there was an open dime on it, I probably would have been like, I like that. I like that entry. That's a
I don't
good
know.
entry.
I don't
I'm
know.
gonna chat with this guy.
You might want to edit that part out. I don't know.
Never, never.
That's hilarious. Hey, John,
Uh,
great to meet you as well. And it's fun to see you mixing it up with people that aren't OGs in the space. I think there's really some fascinating people. I'd like to actually close with one thing because you mentioned sort of the toxicity of Twitter that pops up here and there. And
mhm.
one of the things that I find fascinating is you find people that you align with in terms of Bitcoin. Uh, and so you feel connected to these people, and you just get a deep sense because we're all so deeply committed to Bitcoin. And if you're into Bitcoin, you're on my team, and then you say some really racist or stupid or misogynistic or something, and it really has, or if you're liberal, you get all these hardcore Trumpers, or if you're Republican, you get whatever.
Mhm.
You get people from across the political spectrum, across the personality spectrum, and it's just the toxic Twitter is. I think it's a wonderful reminder that we all have something in common. Like no matter how vehemently we disagree on different things, if the love of Bitcoin can bring us together, or the fact that we all love our children, or the fact that we all love the Trailblazers, whatever, it's there are points of commonality even with people that you think are just absolute uh stupid criminals.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree. And, have to appreciate that everyone is still on their path of development, right? So people
Yeah,
are learning and growing and changing opinions and changing who they are throughout this whole process. And anyone who's engaged in Bitcoin, I think, can at least have some empathy for that, because a lot, it's changed us in either slight or gross ways. So we have to kind of give some allowance for, people that we come across that maybe we don't, agree with
yeah,
everything they say. So my approach is just, to share my perspective, and I get pushback sometimes, of course, because not everyone's going to share it. But and I'll chime in on some conversations if I feel like it. But none of it, like you gotta have it in the proper perspective, right?
right.
Like I've never been upset by an exchange in Twitter. I've never been enraged. I've never been offended. that's
But I'm
just,
sure you've seen people get offended or enraged.
of course. And I think it's ridiculous, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's wild. Well,
Yeah.
John, I look forward to catching up with you again. I'll definitely say hi from time to time on Twitter, and thanks for having me on.
Awesome, man. Thanks for coming on. Be well.
You too.
Cheers, brother.